Thanks, man. I didn't post yet some of the episodes I've put on. I've known the people for many years before, those who said yes. And the last time I've seen you, in my head, you're a teenager. And it's really, really cool to have you in as a professional and in your field. And you know, like, you know what you're doing and you're good at what you're doing, I hear, which is really, really cool.
It's actually nice when people say that, because...
Not offensive?
Well, one of the funny things you have with therapy is it's sort of a word of mouth thing, right?
Right.
You can't trust someone who goes, oh, I'm a great therapist. Not that I think of myself in that context. But I also can't refer you to past clients for recommendations because of confidentiality.
Right.
So as far as I know, I have no feedback on what I do.
Right.
And then someone comes up to me and says, oh, I heard that you're a therapist. And
right.
Maybe he'll tell me how he knows, maybe he won't. But I can't confirm or deny anything.
Right. No, the young part, is that offensive in any way?
No.
You try to be older. I don't know how old you are. I assume it's my brother's age.
Roughly.
But yeah. So I'm like, I find it extremely cool that someone your age could be doing what you're doing, because what does healing look like other than that? So if healing looks like anything, it looks like this, that it's not, that the wisdom doesn't have to come from someone that's 30 years older than me. The wisdom could come from, it always amazes me how people can be inspired by me when they're 20 years older than I am. And it's really cool for me to experience that. I'm young, and to have someone younger that is inspiring and insightful is for me a tribute to, like, okay, work works. Like, the work works.
Right. Yeah.
That's for me, it's tribute that the work works. So you were saying before.
Wait, just to, follow up on this point, I think it really speaks to us becoming better teachers. And I know this from the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world, which is a little far out. But in martial arts, there used to be this idea that if you were a black belt, you had the supreme knowledge, right? It's like if you walked around with a blue belt, the black belt was the guy you had to defer to. And then in the last 10 years, there's been a revolution where, because our understanding of martial arts theory has gotten to such a finely developed level, we're able to convey things much better. So someone who's only been studying for 3 years might have had 3 years of such great studying that he'll be able to school many of the black belts. Wow. Might have picked up some misconceptions along the way.
Wow. And does everyone agree on that? Or is it only the blue belts that agree that they might be insightful too?
So I could even throw names out there. Really? It's like a universal phenomenon that a guy named John Danaher is such a good teacher that his student, Nicky Rodriguez, after only training for 2 years, was able to win the ADCC, which is like the Olympics of Jiu-Jitsu. And
he's still on a student, like, sort of belt level.
Sure. I mean, he has wrestling experience.
Right.
But I'm also seeing this in the healing world, where people are like, oh, wow, you're in your 20s. And then I've met teenagers who have blown my mind.
Right.
Like their insights.
And that is what's starting to happen. And it's humblingly wonderful. Right. It's truly humbling. I know that growing up in Chazal, there's the Zakein is Zek Kana Chachma, not age. And it's starting to hit, it's starting to happen, which is, again, humblingly wonderful.
Right. Like, I meet someone who figured something out intuitively, and this person's 10 years younger than me. And it took me like 5 years or 20 years to piece this together. And there he is spouting it like it's common sense.
That is so wild.
It's crazy.
And it's like, we think that technology is revolutionizing the world. It's like, what is really revolutionizing the world? The way the brains have started opening, I guess, with intuition.
Right.
Or is it or like, what feeds what? Technology really opens our hearts? Or is it our open hearts and people following passion that actually creates the technology that we know? Like, what's really revolutionizing the world?
Right.
I have no idea, but it sounds like open hearts, which is, at first, I know, to me, at first it might be an invitation to feeling pain and anxiety. I shared with a friend recently, am I more anxious than 10 years ago? For sure. Do I want to be who I was 10 years ago? Hell no. Right. So at first it's access to those emotions, but afterwards there's access to
all kinds of deeper stuff, right? But, I think that's interesting, because if you meet someone who's on the journey of healing and he asks, is this a journey I should embark on? And then he looks at you maybe. He goes, you're a coach. Do you not feel anxiety anymore? And it's like, Well, actually,
Well,
it's
I hate like doing that with new clients. Like I'm building a relationship with someone, and my world is built on a lot of vulnerability and honesty, and that's my first welcome.
Right.
Welcome to me. I'm an anxious nut. I'm really, really joyful.
It's a great time, right? And so you have to explain to this person who's terrified to feel anxiety that not only will he feel anxiety, but with any luck, he'll be glad that he's doing it because he's having a more embodied, richer human experience.
Right.
And it's a tough sell for many.
Right. So you specialize in trauma? Is that
Even earlier than this, excuse me, because I'm keeping tabs, and you said you wanted to go back to what we were discussing earlier.
Oh, thanks for organizing my ADHD head.
But the reason I bring this up is because I think it's a natural segue to you asking where it starts, like with an open heart. And I think it all starts with ideas, right? Like, sure, having an open heart is wonderful, but if the idea that your heart being open is not a bad thing hasn't occurred to you or been suggested to you, then how do you know to open your heart? Right.
Right.
And that's
how do I know I can? How do I know that it's okay to? So the idea is like what the mindset around opening a heart,
right.
One's heart.
Like I'm sure at some point in your life, you've had someone who suggested something along those lines to you, that maybe it was okay to feel, or that vulnerability was not a weakness, and maybe just said it in a off-the-cuff way where he didn't think he was saying anything mind-blowing, and then you were able to absorb that idea and walk away with it. You know, sometimes people drop ideas, and they're not trying to be deep or profound, they're just riffing, and it really impacts our lives.
Right.
And that's one of the things I like about these podcasts.
Right. Because once an idea, a simple, humble idea was shared with 4, and now it's shared with masses.
Sure.
That's wild. It's really a question of what leadership is. Like leadership completely transformed. Like the leadership that sparks my interest is the leadership that's just very, very simple. Right. Like simple words that people tell to one another from a place of reality. That like, oh, I like that. That I want to follow that. So that's the kind of a leadership that I think is happening a lot now. And I guess podcasting is a place where that happens a lot. Yeah, I'm still learning my way with this whole thing.
Yeah, well, I'm very concerned when people are no longer learning, when they're like, oh, I figured it out. You know, like I'm wary of people with the answers. So that's, to me, a great sign.
Right.
You know, I hope to still be learning.
Yeah. Yeah. The people that mentor me, that I'm friends with, are people that are always interested, and they always got something new, something else they heard, something, it doesn't take away from my, MTV show time or nothing time, but I can't do one without the other. And I think that a lot of the people in my life are like that. It's a constant seeking for, it's just a genuine, maybe at first it's like for me, it was trying to fulfill a void. And with time, it's just curiosity and the excitement of knowledge and ideas. And, we can think of it this way, and we can think of it the other way, and we can venture my opinions in a completely new way. And I think it's both. Is it like fulfillment of this black pit that people claim is inevitable to fulfill? Or is it a genuine childlike curiosity seeking for knowledge and for ideas, and the thrill in that, the chemical thrill in the knowledge? Right. Like, what happens when I'm enough? Am I still seeking or am I done seeking?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, first off. And I know people who get very into why they're doing what they're doing, right? Because the right thing for the wrong reason and so on. But there's this, I want to say this Eastern wisdom that says that the path to enlightenment involves chopping wood and carrying water. Hard work, so to speak. And then the question posed is, well, what do you do after enlightenment? And the answer is, you chop wood and carry water.
Yes.
You know? It's always about the deepening of that work.
Yeah. So I continue seeking, and now it's just deeper.
Right.
That's cool. That works.
Yeah.
It's richer. It's like adding like sparkles of joy to the experience. So maybe I am seeking to fill, but with more joy and with more joy and more fulfillment and better relationships and healthier habits while I'm doing what I'm doing. So is there something like, do you believe in someone being healed, can be okay finally? And it's a full question. And I'm thinking of I'm not thinking of the question in the words that I'm asking it. I'm thinking of when someone shows up to a therapist, sort of say broken, okay, which I don't think exists, but they think they're broken, and really life looks messy and hard and difficult and complicated, and can a person actually change that and completely transform all aspects of their life? And even their own relationship with themselves, like fully.
So that's the $1 million question.
Yeah.
And this comes back to where I cut you off earlier when you started bringing up trauma, right? I believe, and I would be surprised if you didn't, but I'm open to alternate trains of thought. I believe that human beings are inherently whole, right? There's like a wholeness to us. And what's needed to make us whole is not across the sea. It's not in South America or in India. It's not in another breathwork session. It's within us.
I love the stomach laughter of agreement. Those are very joyful. Yeah.
But sometimes we start buying into this lie that it's not so. And then we can spend many, many years going all around the world, trying all those things, just to come back to realizing that, okay, it was actually within me all along and everything was actually okay. It was just my belief that it wasn't. That was the source of most of the issues.
So the purpose isn't to change anything. So if my question was, can I actually transform and change? Well, if everything I'm seeking is already within me when I show up to that first session, so there's no goal of actually changing and transforming. It's like, it's a process of
unlearning most of that.
Yeah.
It's actually a really messy paradox. And it's kind of hard sometimes to convey it when in relation to oneself. I think a better area to look at it is, let's say, with a religious parent who has a kid who leaves the fold, right? Goes off the derech, so to speak. And this guy, Avi Fishoff, in recent years came up with this crazy idea called twisted parenting, which just involves unconditional love and acceptance of your kid. And the idea there is that the worst way to get your kid to change for the better is to not accept them and put pressure on them.
Right.
And paradoxically, the best way to get them to become their best selves is by being okay with where they are, no matter how far away it is from their best selves.
And even encourage it.
And exactly, and be supportive.
Do you think he's extreme?
I think that he's definitely extreme relative to our society. But I think desperate times call for desperate measures. I think,
like, I know people, the Hasidic people that threw parties with DJs in their home, joints passing around, without sending funded by the parents, without sending the kids away. Like everyone stayed for it. So is it extreme? Yeah,
very. But
is it necessary?
I think for the most part, if the parent had been able to practice unconditional love and acceptance of the kid up until that point, the kid would not have gotten to a place where accepting what they're doing seems so radical. And I think that there's a very similar parallel with inner work, which is what I was getting to, which is when it comes to ourselves. If we really want to change for the better, the first thing we have to do is just accept ourselves where we're at.
Radically.
Very radically.
Yeah.
Right? And like sometimes a person's anxious and they don't want to accept that. Right? It's like, I want to be a higher version of myself who isn't anxious. That's a beautiful thing. I want growth. And the answer is that the growth will come by you accepting who you actually are in this moment.
Yeah.
Surrendering to the experience. And it's this
the paradox. Reason it's radical is because it's the complete opposite of what I'm aiming to achieve.
Right.
I'm aiming to be healed. And here I'm sitting, accepting myself being an adult that can't function sometimes.
Exactly.
So that acceptance is radical and wild.
The caveat is that if you accept yourself only in order to change, doesn't work.
Right, because not really loving.
It's not real acceptance.
It's an agenda. It's being that parent that really has no interest in what I'm into. It's just an agenda.
Right. I'm okay with you because I want you to go back to shul.
Yeah.
And with ourselves, it's I'm okay with the anxiety because I want to stop being anxious.
Right. So that's a trap I find myself in a lot. I want to like breathe on that for a minute before I go to the next thought.
Sure.
Yeah, I find myself in the trap. It's like I know that I'm doing what I'm doing just to escape acceptance. But then I guess there is a fear in actually like what happens. I used to hear this a lot. I think today my value system changed, so I hear it less. Like I attract something different.
Different frequency.
Yeah, but I used to hear it a lot. Like if I actually surrender, what is going to get me to work? Like why? You familiar with that question?
All the time.
What do you think?
Sure.
Isn't it dangerous to accept so radically?
So I think there's this misconception that people have, and I'll stick with the analogy of anxiety, but this goes for all areas. Let's say someone walks around with a tremendous amount of anxiety, say that they won't make enough money. And so this anxiety gets them out of bed and gets them to work. And they're very successful and they eat themselves up on the inside. I know many people like this. They truly suffer. And they go, what if I let go of that anxiety? And then like I become homeless.
So the anxiety is, I won't make enough money. So what they do is they're motivated.
Right.
And then what eats them up is that what they're not like taking care of themselves.
To the point where they're not right. But what gets interesting.
Like what do you mean? Like what's the issue with I'm used to be very workaholic. I'm still struggling. So what's the issue with that hard work? Like why are they struggling?
Right. So they're struggling because they're dealing with anxiety. They feel anxious,
so much work.
They don't feel good. Right.
So the acceptance would be to just chill a little.
Right.
But then there's the fear of finances. So they
tell themselves this is a helpful anxiety. Right. If I stop, won't I no longer be able to make it to work?
Right.
Right. Won't my life just fall apart?
Right.
Will I lose my house?
Right.
But really, even that question of what will happen if I let go of the anxiety, it's a trick. It's just a furtherance of the anxiety. Right. It's the anxiety presenting itself in like a meta 4D version. And the truth is that I really believe deep down that without the anxiety, they'll still make it to work and they'll be better at work because they'll be performing without anxiety.
The transition, though, might be a break.
Right.
Or it might be this transition. I think let's talk about finances and anxiety, which is common and very relatable to me. The transition period seems scary, and it might actually have a dollar and cents effect.
Right.
Like if I change, like companies change policy in order to regulate and have people work normal hours and create a work-life balance. And it actually affects the business, at least at first. And it's like almost the commitment to acceptance means the commitment to whatever like dollar and cents effect it might have. Could be in relationships, the commitment to lose a relationship, fall out of a relationship, seek a different relationship. It's radical.
It's
because it has an actual effect on life. It's not wrong at first. Like the fear of like, oh, I'm going to lose out by changing my approach to the way I work might be might be true.
Right.
Like,
so there's this, you're familiar, I'm sure, with the sunk cost fallacy, but I'll repeat it for anyone who may not have heard those terms. But oftentimes you'll have someone puts money into an investment and it starts giving him bad returns. And he goes, I'm already in it for $1, $100,000. It doesn't matter. What's another 15,000, 15 million? It doesn't matter. And then when it keeps on dropping, they go, I'm already so attached to this. I can throw another 30 in, you know?
I love that analogy.
And it keeps on going and it bleeds you dry. And at some point you have to go, whoa, this is really not what's working for me. And I need a radical U-turn here. I have to be prepared to walk away and see what happens on the other side. Now, what's on the other side of letting go of anxiety, of course, is a more whole self. So we know that what's on the other side once you get there is going to be a better lived experience. We don't have to worry about that. Oftentimes, therapists, coaches, where we're really needed is in the transition period, where the person realizes, hey, this emotional investment, it's bleeding me dry. I believe that there's something on the other side. If not, no one would be calling either of us, right?
Right, and the hand holding is to I guess, regulate and bear what comes with that transition, with the saying no.
Yeah.
There's so much like New York, New York, hustle, young, millennials. There's so much yeses. I'll jump into this. I'll say yes to that. And where's the no? Like, show me the no's.
Can you set an internal boundary at any point?
Can I put my boundaries? Can I be okay being judged or not liked or like, Yeah,
and these are difficult questions. And like you say, the process.
So why is it scary?
It's scary because our brains play a trick on us. Our brains are quick to normalize things. If I were to walk into this room next time and say the water cooler wasn't here, I might feel like something was wrong. And I might not even know what it is because I might not have consciously registered that there was a water cooler here.
That's wild.
But in my mind, I walk in here and this is just how the room is supposed to be.
That is such a wild analogy or example. Then it might cause me discomfort without even knowing what's missing.
Right.
Wow.
And with the anxiety, if the anxiety emerged to protect us, which it usually does, anxiety is there to protect us from something that once would have overwhelmed us when we were not where we are now. And our mind goes, this is our homeostasis. This is what's normal and what keeps us safe. So can we let go of it? Aren't we risking being overwhelmed again, being traumatized?
So if a water cooler that I don't even notice is missing can feel off, of course, something that I know will impact my life and my relationships, of course I'll feel off.
It's terrifying.
Right.
And also, what if it's all you've ever known?
So I don't even know that there's another side or what another side looks like.
Yeah, so you're just venturing off into the unknown, trying to let go of this thing that's been protecting you all your life. It's kind of scary.
Shoosh, I feel it. Wow. I feel like I'm walking through an immersive experience. I'm like really listening. It's just because we haven't schmoozed. Right. So everything you're saying is like in your words and new. And it's very exciting to me. I'm very much enjoying hearing the way you're explaining these things.
Thank you. I love how off the cuff this is. Because you were saying there was a list of things that you sent my way.
I did send you a list.
You sent it, but I think neither of us really looked at it. And that was like 2 months ago.
Yeah. Trauma. Yeah. What do you think? What do you think of the word? There's a couple of more words that I'm like, I feel like I want to just drop and see what you think of it and how you relate to it.
So in what sense?
I don't know. Any, you tell me. It's used in my circles a lot. I'm traumatized by this. I'll be traumatized by that.
Right.
I've been,
there was a philosopher named Ludwig Wittgenstein. Mid-20th century European philosopher. And he talked about how the limits of your vocabulary are the limits of your reality. If you don't have the words for something, it just gets lumped into, wow, that was crazy, man. And it gets lumped into a bunch of other experiences.
That's brilliant.
It's hard to bring with you.
Really, really cool. Like if I can't put it to words, it gets lost. And then it causes whatever it causes without me even knowing why.
Right. Sometimes for the better.
Right. Some things are sometimes
transformative, but you don't have the words for it. So it's important to have words for things, but we run into two tremendous issues. And first off, that the words themselves can inaccurately portray the inner reality. Like if I tell you that I'm feeling happy, I'm really hoping that you understand that the word happy has nothing to do with the emotion internally, but you too have experienced this emotion, can correspond it to this word, and have a sense of what it is that I'm saying. But the more
it's a lot of weight on one word.
It's a lot of weight, right? Yeah. And the more nuanced you get with emotions, the more difficult this becomes.
Right.
I'm feeling mildly anxious, but not concerned. I'm upset, but not angry. I have to really hope that you have the same vocabulary for your emotions.
An experience around those words. Right. Which is where relationships, this is a whole other thing. But this is what happens. Relationships and words have a lot to do with just even agreeing on what words are.
Right.
Wow.
And then to make this problem much worse, there's a time when the words are not helpful.
Right.
Because take a diagnosis. Have you ever looked into why we diagnose people? So I think that there are 3 reasons for diagnoses. The most important one is so we can bill insurance. Without a doubt.
Which is why I haven't looked into any of that.
Right. So. It's like, who cares?
Yeah.
Because if the insurance company comes to me and I say, well, this client is really struggling with existence and needs an indeterminate amount of time for healing, insurance company
that doesn't
goes,
fly.
Oh, is this an unlimited amount of money you think we have here?
Right.
But if I go, oh, the client is suffering from complex PTSD, the estimated treatment course is 6 months to 2 years at once or twice per week, then the insurance company goes, okay, I'll cover a third of that. So that's the main reason.
It helps to like quantify what it is that we're going to spend on. It's a money thing, budgeting thing.
Absolutely. Now,
but those who wrote the books was before insurance. Yes and no.
Yes, big time yes and no. For example, in the
it wasn't insurance, but it was probably quantifying it for the purpose of something.
Yeah, for the purpose of trying
not the client.
Not at all.
Wow.
So that we could try to make our mental health diagnoses sound synonymous with medical diagnoses, so we could think of it as being a science.
Wow. Right. I forget where the world was.
Right.
I wasn't here, but from what I hear, it wasn't where it is today. So it really needed that type of...
Right.
Wow.
So 2 great byproducts of that is that if I have a diagnosis, a client with a certain diagnosis, and I'm referring him to you, instead of describing his behaviors, I can throw you a buzzword and you'll have a rough idea. But that's a byproduct of the insurance thing.
Right.
Another great byproduct is if the client feels incredibly alone in his emotional experience, not only is there a word for it, but he can also maybe go and find support groups.
So that part is where I feel my heart. And everything you said till now was like here.
Right.
And I didn't like it because I know ADHD for me is really helpful to put into a name. Really, really helpful.
Right.
So it's the support, it's understanding myself, what I need, what my body needs. So that part is where I...
Right, where you feel safe and at home.
Yeah,
right?
with names. And I mean, it took probably a couple of decades till that...
to get comfortable.
For me, for the world, like where it's not a... Yeah. Okay, so that's the third thing.
Right, but now you have this issue. This word, let's say narcissist, is very common right now. You have people throwing that word around.
I had that word in my head already.
So if I'm working with you as a client, or I don't want you to be the victim of this analogy.
I'm fine with that. Go for it.
So if I'm working with you and I go, this person is dealing with narcissistic personality disorder, and I use that word as a supportive word. In my head, it helps me organize the behaviors that you have. I can work with you based off of this and look at the research. Then that's great. But if I'm friends with you and our friendship brings up something uncomfortable, and instead of confronting that discomfort, I just go, he's a narcissist. And that word is actually really not helpful. It's a dismissive way to write off another human being.
That's the issue with
a lot of words.
With a lot of words, with diagnosis. It's when it's not used in the context of helping and resonating and loving and supporting. Wow.
So this is across the board, these 2 issues. You'll have it with trauma, with given diagnoses. It's the question of what the word actually means, right? Like when I call someone a narcissist socially, do I really mean that they fit 5 of the 9 criteria set out by the DSM, or do I mean
probably?
Right, or do I just mean that, they did something I didn't like, so I'm going to use this word that doesn't actually mean narcissism to write them off in a really
right. It's like
manner.
You said earlier. I'm having like when I'm describing happy, can they gauge what I refer to or I mean by saying happy or sad or anxious? Same goes with words like that. Like when I say narcissist or traumatized. It's a very relative, when I use it socially, it's very relative to, it's like, it's almost like it has to happen this way right now. Someone said something about, I think it was a conversation about psychedelics, that it has to first be madness, like unregulated, people trying everything. And it's probably the same with mental health. Like it's probably a good thing. It's like the dream of, like, what's my mission in the world? Like if I asked myself 10 years ago, was a lot of what it looks now just without a mess. So generally opening anything will be first messy, like quitting that job or putting boundaries, saying no to a relationship. It will feel messy at first because of my own paradigm that I built. So part of this madness of misdiagnosing or using diagnostic words might be messy. I think as a whole, I sort of believe in it. That's what I'm saying. I believe in the process.
Sure.
But
there's an idea by a guy named Hegel called the dialectic. And the idea is that when we come up with something as a society, the first thing we all do, instead of moving there incrementally and figuring out the right way, is we move to the other extreme. And then we go, okay, we went too far. Let's dial it back. I think that if you zoom out of where we are today and just look at the bigger social trend, that's definitely how society operates on some level, right? First, no one knew the word gaslight. Then we started calling everything gaslighting. And then we're like, okay, now the word kind of lost its meaning. How do we rein this back in?
Right.
And you have this with...
I thought about that on Shabbos, about like I could see the world being different with phones and social media and I can actually envision the world boundaried in a way where it's not like, okay, the people that never answer their phone and the people that always answer their phone, like right now it's like a tug with boundaries, like boundaried where I should. It seems like I can see the world regulating where there is a voicemail and I call back and I have my hours where I scroll through. I can see that happening, and not in 10 years.
Right. I really hope it does.
Yeah. Okay. So where are those words, or pick any of the words that you think are helpful and valuable for me, for people watching. Where are they valuable and how? So let's put words in what's the word? Let's use those words in context of where they're actually of service and valuable.
Right. So I think where they all lose their value is when you use them to write someone off. If I have an interaction with someone, instead of responding to them as a human being, I just go, he's traumatized. What do you want? Or he's a narcissist, lost cause. Right? What I'm doing is that I'm just engaging in writing this person off. Now, it's fine if I need to set an internal boundary and cut someone out of my life for whatever reason.
Right. It's like an easy way out. Wow. I never thought of it that way. I never heard of this said this way. It's really, really cool. It's like if I need to put boundaries with someone and there isn't the word narcissist, I will tell them something which is in my integrity to put boundaries without the word. The word is an easy way for me to just like not need to do anything.
Right.
Wow.
Now I could always say,
which is narcissistic of me to do, which creates a problem.
Right. Well, then you have two people running around saying he's the narcissist. Right. But if you just really speak to your emotional experience, I find it's much more helpful. Saying, hey, this dynamic doesn't work for me, versus you're a total narcissist. I can't have you in my life. I'm
traumatized by you. You're dangerous for me. All these very heavy words. Yeah. Wow. So it's valuable to know with integrity what, I guess when it's helpful to use words like ADHD became helpful. I know in people I know it became really helpful to know how their brains work, like just understand the software. Right. And it's a whole other thing than dismissing. So not to use it in a dismissive way, and rather show up to the relationship or to the dynamic and to the person with integrity. And in a constructive manner. Like, hey, I've done enough work to be aware that I have obsessive compulsive tendencies. So I'm communicating this so you understand my experience and you get that it isn't personal when I make sure that the dishes are really washed after they've been washed, or what have you not. Right. You know. And a support, right? Which is like being congruent with the other person around. Like, oh, I noticed that this and this happened. I'm thinking, or my therapist has suggested, can we have a conversation? What do you think about it? In a very engaging, very not like dismissive and dropping words. Right. That's really cool. That's very different. It's very, very different. It's a very different me that shows up to relationships this way than with assumptions. Sure. And also, like, I've been thinking, all these so-called narcissists that are roaming the streets, like, how are they different than I am? Right. Like what is there as if there is this like therapy, treatment, work, desires, cleaning out like negative patterns. We're equal on this journey. Right. You know, I'm doing my thing, they're doing their thing, and that's all that's left is humans trying to do their best. A while ago, I had this thought, like, no one is more specifically around narcissism. I thought, like, no one deserves or has a lesser or more of a chance to heal in the broader, you know, in the broader scale of like, someone is narcissistic or not, it doesn't give them less of a right to become better in any way.
And again, it's like that's when that word gets used to write the person off.
Right.
Right. Like this person wants to join a healing thing and someone's feeling him out to make sure he's a good fit. He gets information and he finds out, oh, this person is a narcissist. So what? Right. It's like we have to be very careful with these words.
Right.
And even worse, I know people who have internalized these words because they were weaponized by other people. Mm-hmm. And I sit with some of these clients who have accepted that this is who they are and this is who they'll always be because they've truly believed that this title somehow defines them as a human being for all eternity.
Right. Which isn't like what you said that we might agree on and probably agree on, that our well-being is inherently within us.
Right.
Before the session even begun, before the title was even given. Wow. Okay. So what's the value? Where is it used? With integrity in a way of helping. Mm-hmm. So it's not a social word.
Right.
None of those words, none of those diagnoses should or are helpful to be used in a...
Right. I think outside of trying to communicate your own experiences, maybe. Mm. But in general, I try to shy away from gossip. I think talking about other people is really helpful.
Right.
Right. Like if I have a problem with you, the least helpful thing I could do about that is discuss it with somebody else who maybe you're also friends with.
Right.
Right. So.
And on Twitter. And tag me to the conversation just so I know trauma, diving into it a little.
Diving into it, sure.
I guess in the professional setting, in your profession, like, is there ever like, I guess it's not a generalized question in any way. It's not something I know I can't generalize this, but I
have faith in you.
The way I can ask it is from a personal way. Like, when can I say, like, enough, get up, go to work? And when do I say, accept and stay in bed? Mm-hmm. Like, what's like another workshop, another process, another method, or just do my thing for 2 years, then let's talk. What do you got on that? Like trauma, how does it affect in a way that I really can't? Like, how much space should one give themselves? Like, really?
Right. So
when is it an excuse? When is it, like, I think it's worth saying bringing language to the process of like.
So this is a very loaded question, right? I mean, for hundreds, if not thousands or however many years, people would tell people with mental health issues that they just had to stop whining around and just get up and,
Right.
Before we invented this idea of PTSD, World War II General George Patton was essentially demoted because he slapped a soldier who was PTSD'd across the face because he didn't believe in it. He was like, this guy's a coward. And I mean, the guy was, shaking and all that. And then
he was not in to elaborate on it, he was not in where he was. He was reliving something.
Yeah, he was totally.
So his shaking was not in this room.
That was a trauma response.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Used right.
There we go. Right.
Check. Right. That was a trauma response to the circumstance, and the general called him a coward.
Essentially, right.
Right.
We thought that he should be court-martialed, actually.
Wow.
And thankfully, we've moved out of this place, and in the West, we've developed some more compassion for people going through it. And I still think that as a society, we have a long way to go. But we've essentially...
You mean with accepting where people are emotionally and
being able to construct the sort of society that makes space for people to go through what they have to go through.
So they don't fall out because they're going through.
Right. Right.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Like right now we have the risk of someone dealing with mental health issues for just a little bit too long, and there goes their job.
Right. So how would it work? Like, how would it work in a better world?
Just to throw some ideas out there. We might be getting to a point with automation where we actually don't need to work 6 days a week, 40-hour work weeks, right?
Isn't there a country that does that? They change, or a company or Google? I don't remember who that completely changed the work week.
There are a lot of conversations about this.
Wow.
Google encourages naps mid-workday, or at least they did at some point.
Wow.
There are conversations about the 4-day work week being a mainstream thing
That's
just,
wild. And that really allows for people to just go through their emotional cycle and psyche
to
easily.
just recharge.
Because there isn't I came back from Israel the other week and they have a 6-day work week.
Right. They work on Sundays.
I'm stressed from watching them. We went to a hotel for Shabbos, and Matzah Shabbos, an hour after the Zman, the place was empty. And I'm like, where's everyone? Oh, they have work at school tomorrow morning.
Right.
Where is their time to feel, to recover. Be, to recover, right. To make a plan, to just stop for a minute and podcast. So that's one, right? So to really, change from the 9 to 5.
Right. And a lot of people don't know this, but the 9 to 5 is a very new concept. In the early 1920s, or the early 20th century, I should say, there were 12-hour workdays. And when people striked to get shorter hours, I want to say in Chicago, the police set dogs on them and maybe even shot at them. There were riots over this.
Wow.
The battle for the 8-hour workday or for kids to not be allowed to work was really fought with like blood and sweat and tears.
Wow.
And now we've sort of fallen into this new homeostasis and we go, 40 hours is what's normal. But I don't know that in a more egalitarian society, it would be like that.
Right. Well, yeah. With technology playing a role, something will change and mental health becoming more of a thing that needs space and time.
Sure.
So money is the same because there is automation.
There's automation.
So there's no reason for, so where does the money go? Okay, that's a whole other conversation. But ideally, or in our little world that we're talking about, it's the money goes to the same way it went, with giving people more time and opportunity for other things. Connection, healing, work on relationships, work-life balance, and all that.
Another thing is the amount of paid vacation days the American worker has. I'm very fortunate to be Jewish, and I get Pesach and Sukkot and Shvius and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, to name a few.
Right.
But the average American worker doesn't have most of that. But if you go to the European countries, 4 to 8 weeks of paid vacation a year is the norm. It's a given. But unfortunately, our society is not there in terms of giving people that type of space. You
know, what comes to mind about this, it's like, so my mom has an organization that helps people during the postpartum period and prenatal. She's been at it for many years. Talking about the shift, I remember sharing these same words with people. They would look at me like I'm crazy. What is that? I would say, okay. And the time period after, what about the time period after birth? I'm like, depression, possibly. What? Right. Like, just get over it. So it's very different today. Like generally when I share what my mom does, people could also have to do with the people I'm surrounding myself with, but I believe that it's different. It's
infiltrating these ideas.
People are aware and more. Anyway, so one of the things that are super helpful is support. And I know that Europe gives a lot more maternity leave. Right. I'm pretty sure the husband gets
paternity leave.
Half
a year or something.
And I understand it because it's literally the best cure for postpartum depression is support, like help. Just be there, and the pressure is off the mom, so she can reorient herself and heal. And then the house is peaceful because there's a good amount of support, and things are not like, things are functioning. And I'm like, so when we're talking about trauma and what it takes to reset, a lot of it has to do with just being present, time, and giving myself that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which comes back to like, okay, when am I using that, and when is...
But to highlight, in fact, in many ways, the opposite of depression is connection. Like if you speak to people who are depressed, you'll consistently hear, I feel so alone. I haven't been getting out of the house. I haven't been seeing anyone. I've been staying in bed. So something like paternity leave, where you're just saying, go connect, go be with someone. You'll have support. You'll have someone who's there regularly, hopefully.
Wow.
Right? That can be tremendously healing.
Wow. In every aspect of well-being. Wow. While you said that, what came to my mind was addiction. Also. Like the darkness of not letting people in is a hell of its own. Whatever choice of addiction is one hell, but then the darkness that comes with that, to not let people in and not share and not connect with another, is a whole other hellhole.
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, I essentially view addiction as shame-based trauma. It's almost all.
Wow.
Here's a statistic that was mind-blowing to me. If you had to guess what percentage of people who try heroin walk away addicted from it, ballpark, what would you guess?
I have no idea.
It's 25%.
That's it?
That's it.
I would guess way up
Way
there.
high. You would guess 80, 90% is what I would imagine.
Wow.
But 3 out of 4 people try heroin and go, not for me. Yeah.
Wow.
So we tend to think of specific drugs as being so overwhelmingly powerful that it's impossible to escape their addictive grasp. But really, there's something that really unites those 25% of people who are addicted.
Which isn't the drug.
Which is not the drug.
Wild.
Right.
That is so wild. Which means that the treatment isn't the drug.
Right.
And about the drug and getting rid of the drug and detoxing from the drug, it's something else.
Yeah. Sonny Perlman, who I mentioned just before we got on, he has a place called Our Village. And his method for helping people heal from addiction once they've made it through rehab is to go join a community. Because connection is the opposite of depression in many ways, and community heals addiction.
Wow, that resonates.
Yeah.
I like that. And it's so like underrated. It's like, yeah, like there's a lameness to the needing. There's a lameness. Like I don't know if it's women, men, I don't know, but there is a lameness to wanting other people for support and a community.
Sure.
I should be able to do it myself.
Yeah. Society views it as a weakness, right?
Right.
Like, oh, you need someone else.
Yeah, but then corporations figured out how community and team building makes them a lot of money. And that's socially acceptable.
Right.
That they have team building events and everyone does cocktails, the mixology, that's fine. But for a group of addicts, that's like,
Right. Oh, he goes to that support group.
Yeah.
Another great way to write someone off. He's an addict.
Right. If it's valuable to do a mixology class together,
right. It's
pretty much valuable to do just about any circle together, any space where people are just together and connecting.
Sure.
Wow.
I think a tremendous amount of the issues that I see on a day-to-day basis could and would be solved by stronger community.
Meaning allowing the issue, accepting, just listening.
Sure. Having a space for all of that.
Do you think there's more issues in the Hasidic community than secular?
I don't know for sure.
An opinion, not a statistics, not a...
I was about to throw research papers at you.
Oh, there is?
Sure.
Okay. Tell me more. Because I have an intuitive answer, which I have no clue if it has any basis on anything. So tell me.
So at some point with alcoholism, the theory was that Jews, especially religious Jews, are less likely to become alcoholics.
I've heard all those nice things about the less theft and less house break-ins in the community. I've heard about all those lack of issues that there are.
It's garbage.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
And there are some great, very interesting theories for why religious Jews should be less likely to become alcoholics, including back in the day, there's an evolutionary advantage to being able to control your liquor. Because if you were in their Heim and you got too drunk and walked out of the 4-block Jewish neighborhood, you didn't make it home the next morning. Oh, really? Yeah.
So there was a literal reason to not become an alcoholic.
Right, or to be able to control your alcoholism.
Wow.
And then the fact that we regiment drinking. It's Friday night and Saturday morning. And then Yom Tov, of course. So there were people who theorized that because it's a normalized part of life and there's historical reasons, so on and so forth. In reality, there was just a tremendous stigma against being an alcoholic in the Jewish community. So we weren't getting as much support. So people who took the numbers were like, less Jews here. I guess they're less likely to become alcoholics. But the more accepted it becomes to be confronting issues, the more the numbers go up. And I don't think more people are becoming alcoholics because it's acceptable to get support. I think that
goes with all diagnosis. That's a solid line about everything. Is the world more screwed up than it was?
Right.
I don't think so. I think it's healing more, and therefore we find out more. We're just doing some inventory on the world. Well, we've been screwed up for centuries, and we're finally looking at it.
Oh, that's a great way to put it, the inventory. We're just taking inventory.
Basically, right? So in the religious communities, I cut you off. No. So there aren't becoming. So it's been And it's just like becoming okay to acknowledge the struggles and the issues and the problems. And therefore, you think there is more because of a segregated childhood or from a religious, from an ultra-religious upbringing. Do you think that causes more issues than? And
I would imagine.
I'm asking the question for the Orthodox listener that is only here, or it's only in this neighborhood or in this community. Like that's, I guess, where I'm.
Sure. My intuitive guess is that there's like a dynamic equilibrium. I would say that the numbers are the same, but the reasons are different. I think some people, because of the pressures of communal life, are more likely to have issues, but other people who would have had issues are able to let go of it because of maybe faith or amina. So I think that there's different factors.
If one compensates for the other?
That would be my guess.
That's very nice. Like, yeah, the religious... ultra-religious lifestyle can be supportive, and it can also be like not allowing things to surface. So it can actually do both. And I've seen the write-ups about how religion. I've seen it on some, I think, a podcast or a YouTube thing that someone did about the Hasidic community, and I'm like, I can see where that light that's been shown, like how much of a support a very rigorous religious upbringing can be. So I guess it cancels out one another. Like
so this would be my intuitive guess. I don't have any research to prove this.
Right. I don't think that any research would be accurate in any closed circle of any kind.
Even in open circles, we barely know.
Right. Specifically when it comes to mental health, addiction, substance abuse, like any other. I don't like the word, by the way, calling it substance abuse.
Right.
Because it's such a support for people before finding out a different way.
Yeah, some people call it substance misuse. But
getting there.
But, you know, Gabor Mate says it's very hard to get enough of something that almost works. And the reason the addict wants more is because it almost gets me to where I want to go, but it gets you very close.
Right.
Just not quite there.
Right. The feeling is so similar to feeling enough for that amount of time. Like for the whatever addiction, for whatever amount of time it lasts, it does feel nice. So yeah, I like to really, really honor addiction for what it's given and for the fact that it taught me the feelings I'm after, the sensations, the mindset, what I want to know about myself, so I can try and learn a different way of maybe something more productive, that more fulfilling, maybe more joyful. I think it's lacking joy sometimes. It could be like, you know, the dopamine is there, but is it joyful? I think dopamine could be combined with different chemicals, so it won't always... Like I'm after dopamine.
So much more than just the dopamine.
Right. Yeah. That's so much more than the dopamine. That should be a title for something.
Going back to the question of at what point do you tell the person enough is enough, go on and get out of bed? You know, time to get out of bed and stop being depressed versus just making allowances. So I started off by saying that it was a loaded question. And because there's a combination of things that contribute to our mental health ongoings. And some of it is self-induced. There's no question about it. But much of it is... Which is
the spin, the narrative I keep replaying.
Sure.
So if I'm diagnosed depressed... Why, can I throw a question in?
Sure.
Do you believe in the word? I know that in the book there's something called chronic for everything, chronic depression, chronic anxiety.
Right.
How do you relate to the word chronic? If a person can actually heal, how is it chronic? Like, that's why I'm thinking of it, because if a person pins themselves as or labels themselves, I'm chronically depressed, and of course I'll stay in bed half a week. I know I've done it.
Right.
You know,
we tend to have patterns. Human beings are creatures of habit. And this is, again, one of the areas where I think it goes right back to what I was starting to say, that we are responsible for a portion of what goes on in our head because we continue to engage in maybe thought patterns that don't serve us or aren't helpful. But obviously, if we were totally healed and could just let go of those thought patterns,
we would have.
We would have, right?
Wonderful.
So, it's really a tightrope there, and it's a very complex conversation. And because of this, I've developed a couple of rules. One of which is that I always believe people when they tell me anything regarding their internal circumstances, because even if it's objectively not true, it's important enough to that person for me to think that it is. And usually it's because what the person is really saying is that I need compassion. I need understanding.
I need more acceptance.
Right.
I still need more acceptance. Wow.
So I don't engage in call-outs.
You choose to believe them. Always. Because it'll be always more valuable than not.
Right. Even if I could prove that it's definitively not true, I wouldn't.
Right. Even you can find their own like they're actually better, but they're not.
Right.
You're not going to kick that up because it's not valuable. Because there's another part that really, really, really needs acceptance.
Right. That's what he's communicating in that moment, actually.
Wow.
So if someone...
Again, words used and for what?
Right.
So you hear what they use the word for, the depression. You hear them in the word, how they're using the word depression. You support that.
Right.
In the language that they use that word. Beautiful.
Right. So like if someone tells you they can't get out of bed, they can usually get out of bed. It feels very difficult, and it's hard to explain to what degree it feels difficult, and they don't want to be guilt-tripped and blamed for it. So they tell you, oh, I can't get out of bed. So instead of saying, oh, but you got out of bed 2 days ago and you were doing so much better. If there would be a fire burning when you get out,
that whole thing.
Garbage.
Or for $1 million, you know? That's all that. Like,
old school mentality.
Old school. Right. Like if there's $1 million on the table, will you get up and get it? Right. Well, that doesn't help for what they expressed right now.
Right.
There's a part of them that has a really difficult time getting out of bed.
And so I think here's where we go back to that paradox where if you just really accept them, and you know, I believe human beings above all are resilient and capable. I think we overcome ourselves in spite of ourselves. I think that's what makes us human. So I think that if you give the person the space to do that and you just show up with compassion and openness, I think they oftentimes will do that. That's my take on when you push people versus when you just let them get away with it.
So you actually trust the process of acceptance.
Right.
It's wild.
It's radical.
Actually it's radical.
Yeah.
You look at the person, 2 years in therapy, and you still trust the acceptance.
Right.
It's something, I think it's a very parental role. At least one of the parents. It's very important that parents know how to accept the process of their kids developing into whoever they need to become.
Sure.
I have a 15-year-old.
Oh, wow.
He doesn't listen to this enough to worry. We can talk about it.
If he does one day.
I think I'll listen to his podcast before he listens to mine. He'll randomly listen to probably a short. He'll come across or a reel, but yeah, I know it as a parent and as a support to friends. It's really like how, you know, I've been really good at pushing and working hard. How hard can I work on trusting acceptance? That's a whole new muscle that the world is developing. Right. You see, what I'm doing is, but then what if they take it too far and they actually don't get up? You know, there's I had a conversation with a friend a week or two ago. Like, I need Peterson a little bit once a month for a few minutes. I need some Jordan Peterson. Can I listen to him all day? No. But do I need some of that? I do. So like when I think of radically accepting, I guess it's different if it's as a profession or a friend.
Right.
As a profession, it's like, what's my job? What's your job? What is the person coming here to convey?
Right.
But then as a friend, or when I reach out to a friend, I sometimes want them to just help me get out.
I also think that this is, and I think you discussed this on your first episode, a little bit of the difference between a therapist and a coach.
Right.
A coach is that guy who stands in your corner and says, you got this.
Yeah.
You can do this.
Yeah.
You will do it.
I very often tell this to clients, or I don't like calling them clients, friends, people that I'm connected with. I really, really understand the difference now between a coach and a therapist. I didn't once.
Right.
With my judgments on all sides of the healing world. And I do understand it now. There's a place where actually a therapist friend explained it to me. Like, there's a place where a person's underwater and there's no room for coaching.
Right.
It's not my business to coach them. It's my business to hold and embrace. And it happens in the coaching world somewhat, but
there's overlap between the two. Every therapist is probably 80-20 coach therapist, and every therapist is probably 80-20, give or take.
Probably should. I don't like shoulds, but should be. A good amount of, But totally. Like, there is a space where people should take the time to simply heal. And Gabor Mate, I listened to one of his latest interviews, and he said the difference between healing and fixing. So beautifully said. Yeah. Right. That healing happens on its own, and fixing is something we do to another.
Right, we fix others. So people heal themselves.
Yeah, it's so well says, like you can't heal a table because a table can't do it to itself.
Right.
That's so cool. So there is definitely a time where it's only meant to accept.
Right.
For sure. Only
and
meant to accept.
That's also, you know, it's because if I accept you, I'm giving you the space to heal on your own.
Right.
And
then
if
I'll get out of bed.
It only lasts as long as I'm holding it together. And I try to avoid codependent relationships with the people I work with. I don't want to be holding them together forever.
Right. If there is boundaries in place, then they will know to get up when they need to get up, when they can.
I think sometimes they have to learn it, but I think eventually...
Or it needs to be explained.
I think people, by the time they come to me, it's been explained to them too many times. So many people.
Get up and...
the $1 million in the kitchen.
It wasn't like this once.
Right.
And when I was younger, it was like really there's something like bothering in a neat space to just like be and take a break. And now there's so much of the like get up.
Right.
Get up, get up. Right. We're creating a lot. We're creators. Like every second person I know, and the rest are supporting the creators.
Right.
It's like businesses are different. Technology is different. So people are creators all over. So there's a lot of that. So by the time someone shows up to his session, it's probably it's the time to just be and accept that.
Right.
And really, I think really as a parent or for parents, it's important to learn how to trust that.
Sure.
And the mental health like issue or diagnosis is probably not going to come from acceptance, because they say that it would. Like if I accept what's going to happen next, or what am I going to want to? If I accept myself enough, what am I going to want to do next? I never had that issue. Like if I accept myself enough, I get up and I do good things.
Right. And I think that's the common fear, but I just think that's another form of anxiety and control. This concern that what if I accept my son and he doesn't do anything? Most people don't want to do nothing.
Right. It's a natural desire to do. It's not something that needs to be. That goes back to that.
To the first, right?
When the person walks in, he already has instilled within themselves to create and to build and to grow. It's not something that needs to be induced or given. It doesn't come from another.
Right.
I love full circles.
Like I'll tell you, to the extent that I don't even believe in empowering people. I think that on a galactic scale, each person is so magnificent. And as an individual, I'm so small that who am I to go to another person? This guy has 30, 40, 50 years of lived experience. I spent 3 hours with him over the last 3 weeks, and I tell myself, I'm going to empower him and change him.
Doesn't work like that.
Doesn't work that way.
Which goes back to the other thing about change.
Right.
There is no change. There is discovering what's already there.
Right.
So is it possible to change? Yes and no.
Right.
Yes to the limiting thoughts. No to who I am, because I'm already who I am.
Right. I don't focus on change so much. I get curious about growth.
I don't focus on change. I get curious about growth. Can you say more? I love it.
Sure. I mean, when we talk about change, there's just the implication that the way this person is not okay. We have to change that. We have to tweak it.
So I can totally eye that. When I think of change for myself,
right,
I think that the way I am is not good, and I need to change myself and tweak myself.
Perhaps.
Yeah, I definitely think so.
Right.
And it's as a result of doing a report or analyzing parts of my life and not liking. And the first thought that pops up is, I need to change. And you don't believe in that word.
I believe in the word because the word exists. So I believe in its existence. But in terms of human beings, a natural part of the human experience is to grow. Like if you look around nature, things are either growing or dying. We don't stagnate. So I get curious about growth. Are we growing? Are we doing it in a healthy manner? Is there self-compassion? Is that something that we're thinking about as we progress through life? Are there things that we're working on and that we're growing towards? Right.
Focusing on change seems like it's hurting a lot of things on the way, and focusing on growth seems like it's embracing everything in the process. It's like, it's the air, the water, the rain, the seasons. It's all part of the growth.
It's all part of the dance, right?
Rather than change this, meaning eliminate this, more of this. It's very rigid.
Right.
Right. Probably growth includes change. It has room for change in it for it to happen.
Because change is a part of growth.
It's a meditation. Like it's really like if I can allow my nervous system, my body to like breathe in and relax and know that growth is something that is part of who I am. It happens anyway at every minute. I mean, people that come to your practice, which I'll share in the description, you'll tell them on a very personal level, like in the bigger scheme of things, like the whole healing culture, what would be valuable for people to know is available that you can suggest?
To respond to the first thing you said, because we're wrapping up and I don't want to miss this opportunity. Thank you for having me here. This is a delight and a pleasure.
I hope we can do it again. Thank you.
In terms of alternatives to just talk therapy, I think that the rest of your life has to be, the counterweight. Talk therapy it's almost a frustrating process. It's like 1 hour out of someone's week. It's practically insignificant.
It is. I think it used to be more. And as we are aware of what it takes to be so emotionally developed, it's not enough.
Right. It can definitely feel that way. I also think that maybe it can train you to become more efficient and so on. But regardless.
So it does require a lifestyle other than the session.
Right. So ultimately, that's what I think healing is about, right? It's about your whole life sort of evolving to become a more pleasant place to be and a more pleasant place to experience existence. I've talked about this extensively in other places, but I think hobbies are tremendously important.
I've heard a lot of people say that they don't have a hobby. Something with that phrase doesn't seem right, because I think living means that I have some kind of a hobby.
Right.
I might have a hobby to do nothing, and that's my hobby for now, but like my couch. But yeah, so
sure.
Say more about the hobby.
So I focus specifically on skill-based disciplines that you could practice incremental improvement on at least almost every day, and that will allow you to sort of self-express.
Skill-based discipline. That's what you see in hobbies.
That's the sort of hobbies I look for. Like watching Netflix is a hobby, but you're not developing a skill per se.
And there's no increase in my ability, or I don't become better at watching.
Better, right?
At binge watching.
Maybe you do.
I become better when I watch less, so that's not what you're after. Got it.
But I think that we spend so much time in fight, flight, or freeze. Everyone talks about that. And then when you're in a hobby, it's like
fight, flight, or freeze. Fight or freeze. Nice.
Right.
Never heard that.
Yeah.
Fight, flight.
Freeze is on the opposite end of either of those two.
Yeah. Freeze is a very nice way of explaining flight.
Yeah. So it's actually an opposite to flight. Flight is still activity.
Meaning leaving.
Right. It's movement.
And freeze would be neither.
Playing possum, like freezing up.
Which is social media and Netflix.
And depression.
And depression.
That's like you're not running or fighting. You're just stuck. And so I think that when you have a hobby, it's like you're spending time outside of that entire paradigm. If you walk around with anxiety and you spend 15 minutes a day practicing guitar, then somewhere in there's a strong chance that even if not on day one, but at some point, 3 months, a year, 2 years in, you'll have moments where you're free from all of that and you're just really
like
vibing.
I get lost in that experience. For people that think that they don't have a hobby or don't have a hobby, it's because they think they need to have it before they even spend the time knowing how to do it. It's supposed to suck at first. It's supposed to be...
and I think overcoming that, right? Like
that's the
I'm
key.
anxious about sucking, but I'll deal with it because everyone sucks, and I'll practice being a beginner, and I'll practicing growth, and I'll practice discipline and consistency.
I never understood that about hobbies, and I always admired people that get into woodworking.
I love woodworking.
Wow. Because there's no way I'll be good at cutting those corners at first. Wow. That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, my personality is addictive and instant gratifying, so I'll find hobbies that give me a huge dopamine release at first, and then it'll slowly be more and more boring, and then if I stick to it, it'll sort of balance where the dopamine isn't that high, and it isn't. But what you're referring to is an action, something that I do that I will not necessarily be good at first, and I'm going to slowly, incrementally build and build and build, and sometimes find myself lost in the experience.
And there's an author, George Leonard, and he talks about this. Like when you start a new hobby, if you graph what you've sort of picked up, your learning curve, it's steep in the beginning, and then it almost feels like you backtrack and you plateau.
Right.
And he talks about how if you want to get good at anything, you have to learn to embrace the plateau.
Right.
But that's so helpful for everything else in your life. If you're in a relationship.
It will do that.
It will do that. You'll get past the honeymoon phase, and you leave once you plateau.
Right.
If you want to go to the gym, you're motivated, you go, you bench, and then a month later.
January, the gym is packed.
Right.
It's a real thing, apparently. The gym is actually packed in January every year.
First week of January. It's
unbelievable.
Crazy. Right.
It's amazing how people repeat the same thing every year.
Right. But if you learn to embrace the plateau, and
I'm going to drop, I'm going to quit.
And if you learn to just embrace the plateau and be like, I'm okay with it. It's going nowhere. There's no instant gratification. And any hobby will help you learn this if it's a good hobby. Then you'll be able to sort of apply it to other areas. So what
hobby do you suggest? Like, can you think of examples?
I think anything that allows you to be
music
creative. Is awesome.
Writing and sharing
drawing, painting, poetry. There are endless amounts of hobbies. Woodworking, like you said.
Right. Collecting.
Sure.
People are into that. Right.
Besides for those two, anything.
Because you're looking for the work.
Right.
And knowing that I never understood that first part, me being a junkie for instant gratification, I never understood that in a hobby at first, the friends I have that are into things, they were not as good as they are today when they started. I sort of missed the cue on that.
This guy's good at the guitar because he's good at the guitar.
I think in my own process, I never valued that so much. I get focused on, now I'm better at this, and that's all I think about.
Right.
I really don't value the
process itself. Yeah.
Like honor, value, give credit to, and understand that it's how everything works.
Sure.
Like I sort of missed it. I didn't pin that.
Right.
Like in here I know it, but like emotionally and internally, and as really spending time with that part, even talking about it is very, very cool.
Right. Outside of hobbies, I think fitness is important. I think mental, spiritual, physical, emotional health, these are all closely connected.
Right. So finding routines in all these different parts.
And it doesn't have to be the 5 hours a week at the gym, but any sort of physical movement that's regular, that's disciplined.
Anything more than not is more is right. When it comes to physical movement, it's so important to know that. Two things I've learned about my lack in exercising. One is that the goal isn't to exercise, the goal is to start when I stop. For me, because I'll stop. And my new focus became not that I exercise every day, is that I start when I stop. Because once I'm at it, I'm at it.
Right.
The real work is when I stopped.
Right.
And the second thing that I've learned is more than not is always valuable. And it will...
infinitely more valuable.
Yeah.
Right.
Like so much more valuable.
In fact, if you're working out for an hour a day and you tack on 5 minutes, big deal. But if you're working for 0 hours a day and you tack on 5 minutes...
So nice when we put things next to, irrelevant to other things, how they gain perspective and respect.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. I appreciated the schlep, the jersey, the haul, the coordinating time. Thank you. Of course.